Well, welcome. We are talking today about Lent. I'm Peter Doddema. I'm the priest at the Church of the Ascension here in Frankfort. And as you can see, I've got something that looks like a dirt smudge on my forehead. That's from Ash Wednesday, the first day of the season that we call Lent. It's a period of 40 days that come right before Easter that we take time to prepare for Easter, to think about what does it mean that Jesus came into the world? What does it mean that Jesus suffered and died for me and rose again? And for almost 2,000 years, Christians have taken that period of time, that 40 days before Easter, to get ready for that amazing holiday. But you begin with Ash Wednesday, the day where the priest puts ashes on your forehead and says, remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And then we're in Lent, this whole 40-day period where we prepare for Easter. We get our hearts and our minds right. We ask ourselves, are we taking the time that God has given us here on earth, our life, to serve those around us in need, to serve God, to take care of ourselves? It's a time to really ask some serious questions and dive deep into God's call into our own lives. And I want to talk briefly today about some of the scripture lessons that we're going to get during Lent, because they're ones that emphasize that idea of looking within and pulling things out. One of the scripture lessons that we get is Jesus going outside of his Jewish context. He crosses the border out of Israel into a place called Samaria. And Samaritans in the ancient world were people who worshiped in a similar way to Jews, but the two groups were very different, and truthfully the two groups hated each other, and they did not mix even though they lived next to each other. And Jesus traveled outside of Israel into Samaria for a short time, and he sits down by a well, and a woman comes to get water from the well, a Samaritan woman, and Jesus asks her for a drink, which was unthinkable in that context. Those two groups did not mingle, they didn't talk with each other, they hated each other. And his being there and asking that question sparks a whole conversation. She was an unusual person as well, appears to have been a very brave, well thought out, well-spoken person. And so she engaged with him, and they had this whole discussion, and he got her thinking about, what's the trajectory of my life? What's going on? And she was converted through what he had to say and through her own readiness to answer that call of God in her life. So one of the weeks we're going to be focusing on that call of God in our own life, and calls in unexpected ways, because Jesus was a Jew, she was a Samaritan. They weren't even supposed to be talking to each other, and yet God's call came to her through this apparent enemy. It's an exciting passage to talk about. One of the weeks we're going to look at Jesus going out into the wilderness in preparation for his ministry on earth, and he spends 40 days out in the wilderness, just like we'll spend 40 days getting ready for Easter. As he was preparing out in the wilderness, he was tempted. The devil came and met him and tried to get him in his tired state as he was out in the desert to do certain things and to fall away from following God and follow other lesser impulses and instincts as well. And so we'll look at, what does that mean when you are exhausted, when you are at the end of your rope, and this voice comes along and says, instead of sticking to the path that you're called to care for family, to care for those around you, to take care of yourself, to serve God, fall away and do this. What does that look like? And how common that is for that call as well. One of the weeks we'll be looking at healing. Resurrection, healing. In one case, there's a man raised from the dead. In another case, there was a man who was blind and he was healed. And with that healing of the man's blindness, there's a whole series of controversy that comes up around that. Is Jesus somebody special who should be healing people? Is Jesus some kind of false prophet? His own community goes nuts trying to figure this out. Why is he healing people? Should he be healing people? Is this a real miracle? Even though the context is different, it reads a lot like some of the stuff we deal with today. Okay, this religious figure, do we listen to them? Do we not listen to them? How do we determine if what they're saying is something that's godly, that we should follow, or if it's something that is just flat out crazy that we need to ignore and avoid? We'll look at all these different real world type topics that were happening 2,000 years ago in the Bible, but are still relevant for today. The last thing I want to just talk about is what Lent is, because for a lot of you that may be a totally new word that you have not encountered before. As I said at the beginning, Christians have been doing this for about 2,000 years. Lent is a practice of getting ready for Easter. The word itself, it's a funny word, comes from an old Anglo-Saxon word that just means springtime. The original word was Lencten, L-E-N-C-T-E-N, and it just means springtime. It's a time where we get more sunlight in the world, and they acknowledge that. And it's carried into our language in the church. But it's a time where we think about, what's God's call in my life? Am I taking care of myself? Am I caring for those around me, family, friends, those in need? Am I listening to God's voice in my life, or am I so busy thinking and talking that I can't hear it? Because often God is doing amazing things right in front of us and longs for us to listen, but we're so busy and we're thinking so much that we can't even see it. So Lent is a slowing down time as well. It's a time to get ourselves on a good, healthy, holy path and be ready to celebrate Easter, ready to welcome Christ's resurrection and say, wow, this is a profound event. This has a real impact on my life. And there's a real call for me to go out and serve the world because of what Christ did for me. So we'll be doing studies and focus around the church during that time, and then in the days right before Easter, what's called Holy Week, we'll have a special series of services, and we'll have an overnight vigil here as well that you can sign up for, where you just come with other people and you pray, and you just experience God's Spirit in new and exciting ways. But it all culminates on April 9th with Easter Sunday. So again, here we are at 311 Washington Street. And I hope that you will be able to join us on Sundays, join us during Holy Week and on Easter. If you're not able to be here in person, you can find us online. We are on YouTube and we broadcast live on Sundays, so that's a good time to come and visit us as well. But again, I wish you a blessed Lent and a blessed Holy Week and Easter as well.